Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. Behind me is Sir Edward Landseer Lutyens' house in London on Mansfield Street. That's in the Marylebone area. So Lutyens actually died in this house. He was born in Kensington, another part of London, about 3 miles to the west. But he grew up in a middle-class family. But when he was an infant, they moved out of London to Surrey. That's a county just to the southwest of here. So he had several sisters and brothers. I don't know much about his schooling. Then he went to the Kensington College of Art as an adolescent to be a draftsman first of all, and then he joined an architectural firm. And I think I'm right in saying in those days, when you started off as a draftsman, you worked as that in an architectural firm, and they entered you for exams, and then you gradually qualified as an architect. It was much more informal in those days. Went so many into exams, learning on the job to a much greater extent. And architects didn't go to university as such in this country. I know architects do sort of what would you call them, attachments, apprenticeships, things like that to this day. Anyway, I know precious little about architecture, so I shan't attempt to talk about that. They designed all sorts of things, houses, banks and so forth, and had commissions in this country and indeed in Spain. Oh yeah, another thing, he was half Irish. Hooray! On his mother's side, she was a Kerry woman. And he did design a lot of things for Ireland, particularly our War Memorial Island Bridge in Dublin, as in to the Irishmen who served in the British Army and the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy in the First World War. And a few other things which he built as well, often commissioned by the De Valera government. Right, so, well, he married Lord Lutyens' daughter. No, is that right? No, the Earl of Lytton's daughter, that's it, he's Lutyens, who'd been Viceroy of India. They had 5 children, but they drifted apart because she became fascinated with this thing called theosophy, with like a blend of theology and philosophy and Eastern religions, and he was brought up as a Christian, had no time for this kind of stuff, even though he's not particularly zealous about his faith. I don't know whether he was a Protestant or a Catholic, actually. It doesn't seem to be terribly important. Anyway, so next step about him. The really famous thing about him is Lutyens Delhi. So in 1912, the British Raj decided they would shift their capital from Calcutta to Delhi. Now, there's a legend which says that any Indian empire that moves its empire to Delhi, moves its capital to Delhi, shall soon fall. Now, heedless of this, the British Raj pressed ahead with this scheme. So Calcutta, or Kolkata as it now is, was the capital of Bengal, in the very east of India, and that's where the East India Company had its headquarters from the early days. Job Charnock helped to found the city when he married that Hindu widow, dissuading her from sati, as in ritual self-immolation of her husband's funerary pyre. But I know many Indians say, but there was already Kalikat, as in like the Kali's platform or altar, and that's where the city takes its name. But they decided they would shift it to Delhi, and of course the Mughal Empire had their capital there, and the Mughal Empire had only been formally dissolved in 1858 after the failure of the Indian Mutiny, or as many Indian nationalists would prefer to say, the First War of National Liberation. Anyhow, so he went out to India and he surveyed the ground and he drew up his grand plan. So it took years to complete, and the capital wasn't formally shifted to Delhi till 1931. And we often say New Delhi because there's Old Delhi several miles to the north, but one blurs into the other. Old Delhi is around Lal Qila, as in the Red Fort, and the old Jama Masjid, that area, which is more, what shall I say, just old-fashioned, a little bit chaotic. I'm not wishing to be disparaging, but more authentic. His is planned, often in straight lines, but it can be diagonal lines. There's a bungalow zone. A lot of it's quite low-rise. There's a Raj path, which is dead straight for a couple of miles. I've walked it a few times. There's India Gate in the middle, a huge thing modelled on l'Arc de Triomphe, which is a memorial to the Indians who gave their lives for the British Empire in the First World War. And there's Rashtrapati Bhavan, formerly the Viceregal Palace, the Parliament Building of India, and so forth, various government ministries. So this stone was hewn in India. It's often this reddish-brown colour, close to the ochre colour of the soil hard by. It's all very flat, very pleasing. It keeps it a little bit away from the river, which is slightly prone to flooding. There's a zoo at one end of the Raj Path, but off to the side, various museums and art galleries. So that is the magnificent Lutyens Delhi. There's what was Connaught Place. They often pronounce it Connaught, place, as in the Irish province, but it was named in honour of the Duke of Connacht, one of Queen Victoria's younger sons. But I might have been renamed Rajiv Chowk. I heard it called that, Chowk being like a crossroads or a roundabout in Hindi. All right, so that was splendid. He saw his dream realised, and he built many things here. He designed Liverpool Catholic Cathedral, Paddy's Wigwam, as they call it, but that wasn't finished for decades. He didn't live to see it, and they still didn't complete his plan because it just would have been too enormous and too costly. So he died on New Year's Day 1944. I'm not sure where he's buried. And Landseer, I have a feeling there's a famous landscape artist called Landseer. I wonder if he's named in honour of him. So that's what little I know about this dapper, mustachioed man with the owlish little glasses called Edwin Landseer, Lutyens. He was knighted just after the First World War because by 1900 he was one of the foremost architects in the Commonwealth. What else about him? He had been quite audacious and experimental apparently. Early in his life, he did his own practice making in '88. It's only latterly that he became more classical and conservative in his tastes. I think maybe that's what those who commissioned him wanted as well. He designed the cenotaph as well. That's the centerpiece of the Remembrance Day commemorations in Whitehall. You know, so 11 o'clock in the morning, 11th of November. Or the nearest Sunday there too, to commemorate the end of the First World War. Cenotaph, meaning empty tomb in ancient Greek, this raised slab of grey stone to represent a tomb for all these soldiers. So you see them all over. He designed other war memorials like Thiepval in France. It's very close to the Belgian border for the Battle of the Somme. Thiepval meaning deep valley in Flemish, because of course in the extreme north of France they actually spoke Flemish well into the 20th century as their mother tongue. Right, that's enough at the moment. Toodaloo.